Porsche's latest news shocks the entire car market. This is way worse than they could have imagined. When you look at the inventory, they have lots of inventory sitting, piling up, but part of the problem is Porsche as well as VAG Group were some of the first ones to get on the wagon with trying to sell a lot of electric vehicles. Like these particular units right here, we have Macans, and they were going pure EV. But that was up until recently, where they had heard that nobody was really looking for EVs. Sales were drastically down for Volkswagen, and Porsche was following suit. As the VAG Group, they knew that the writing was on the wall. They had to slow the transition into electrification because their sales were suffering. And while there was a glimmer of hope in North American market, unfortunately the Chinese market is vastly down. And the European market is down on sales too, and believe it or not, even Germany, its home country, is down on sales. The worst part is the latest conversation about tariffs is hitting Porsche and Ferrari particularly bad, as they really don't have any North American plant and manufacturing facilities able to remanufacture a lot of these products that they're selling currently today. Ferrari's comment that they're going to pass through about a 10% tariff on top of the sales of a lot of their unique models, and even Porsche is going to be susceptible to some of these tariffs as well. Mercedes-Benz has seen massive drops in sales, and it feels like the entire European Union is struggling on a lot of their products. Volkswagen has held up a lot of their vehicles at port, so has Audi, just because they have to brainstorm to figure out what they're going to do next to get the sales to continue on without hammering on the North American buyer. Now, for the Porsche 911 fans, they know that a lot of the value stays with the cars. These cars are extremely high priced, but even if there's a tariff that somehow passes through, they know the residual value, particularly on coupes like the 911 like this, are always sort of there. So you're not wasting all your money. Even with consumers buying the 911, they realize that later on, a lot of the values come back. And while they're not the cheapest cars to maintain, own, or operate, or insure, or any of that, they're a premium car, and certainly we've seen the prices rise recently. And a lot of that is partially due to inflation. A lot of that is partially trying to recuperate everything else they're doing within the organization on the EV side. But if you looked at the pricing on the latest 911, it's getting out of hand.
The new Carrera starts at 130,000 United States dollars.
They've jacked prices up on the GTS, the 911, just about every Carrera and Turbo S. You can't even get a GT3 even if you have the money. So it's a hard car to come by, and that's why prices are very, very high. It's a very popular model. Is it going to hurt the brand? Sure. The customers are going to always pay a little bit more, and we're starting to see the price increases now. One model that hasn't done all that well for Porsche, though, is the Taycan. We're talking about some of the EVs in the Porsche world. You know, this is the same vehicle as Audi and the Audi e-tron GT, more or less the same platform, similar drives. And the unfortunate part is there are customers that will buy these. There are customers that have the money, and there's customers that really need to have them, particularly if they're looking for something that's not a Tesla and they like performance. Well, Porsche prioritizes a lot of these electrified vehicles, and they do it in a way that looks their own brand. Of course, Porsche, I love the style of this Taycan 4S. You get the turbo 4S over there. Look at this, you get this fastback look, unique style. You get a couple different models, they're both 4S, but clearly a different style of finishing. But great looking cars. And you know, even the interiors are nicely done. Gorgeous vehicles, but the secondary market has been absolutely devastating on Taycans. There's been people that have gone out, spend hundreds of thousands of dollars only to find out trade-in at 2 or 3 years later, they're only offered up a 30-35% of their original value. And many of the electric vehicles have fallen to the fate of competition, particularly in China. But we know Tesla has struggled for various reasons. Some of it's political, some of it's the brand, some of it's even the owner, and more importantly, even some of it's just competition. But even brands like Jaguar are not selling all that well. And here we have a Jaguar I-Pace, not a great seller, never has been. Unfortunately, Jaguar now with the rebrand has even less people participating in purchasing these new vehicles. Now, Jaguar has taken a year off, but time will tell whether we get something, a product that buyers are interested in. That will be determined. But of course, we do have a lot of vehicles on the market. This is an EV Jaguar. We have a Tesla, all plugged into this charging station right here. And vehicles like this have been the bane of Porsche's existence in recent months, because with Porsche's push to go pure EV, they've transformed one of their most popular models, the Macan. That's right, we have a Porsche Macan, but this one here specifically is electric. You'll notice simply by that badge on there. And of course, it's an interesting looking vehicle, but here they have quite a few lined up, as you'll notice, quite a few here that aren't selling. A lot of buyers are not interested in these vehicles. You can tell also a giveaway. Look at the front, there is no grille. This is pretty much a giveaway. You have this rounded out grille, very much in the spirit of electric vehicles. But this one here is selling or not selling. I mean, you get the big red calipers, you get these different style of wheels. You'll notice they're more of a filled in space or a blank right there. But right here we have another one. This is a Macan 4S, and you'll notice very different wheels on this one. Different detailing on the side. This one is also electric. So they're doing different details. They give you different wheel packages and certainly slightly different moldings on the trim and the design of the vehicle. But one thing that's consistent is the front. And you can tell they all have that same unique look. Same thing over here. There's a couple more. We have another one in black, different wheels. Another one, same wheels as that one. And right here, I like these wheels actually, but here's another EV by Porsche. As you can see, I like these wheels. They're a little bit different, kind of unique from the other ones. But if we look on the sticker, these are 2024s right there. So they're clearly not even able to sell the 24s and beyond. These would be probably the first generation of electric Macans that came out to the market. And we scan up here, we see another, this one's a 2025 right there. And I believe this one is as well. But Porsche sadly has reported the first quarter of 2025, and they're down globally by 8%. That is a significant hit. So now they're pushing really hard to try to get customers back in the door. But a big part of that is the declined sales in Europe as well as China. With incentives like the 2025 Macan lease from 5.99%, it's clear that they're pushing to try to promote these vehicles. But the Porsche Taycan of the 2025 is getting even better rate at 4.99%. But cars like the Porsche 911 GT3 have never had problems selling. I like this particular unit. This is a matte silver finish. I haven't seen anything like this before. What a stunning color combination. But these cars here are commanding top dollar, and these are the cars that are bringing in the dollars and the bucks for Porsche. But more great lease rates here for the 25 Cayenne for 3.99%, as well as a Macan electric vehicle leased from 4.99%. Lots of incentives, clear indication they're pushing hard, but the product's not really moving. So while Porsche has seen some sales success in North America, certainly in China, they've down 42% in sales in this first quarter. On top of it, in Europe, they're down about 10% as well. And there's problems at the homestead that a lot of these vehicles aren't selling all that well outside of the North American market. Now, a lot of the US market certainly is pushed heavily with incentives, and we saw that at the end of 2024. Meant that a lot of people were getting out there and hustling. We saw those signs. We saw there's a real push to get people, whether they buy them or whether they just lease them. There's lots of great options out there to buy a Porsche. But unfortunately, with tariffs, competition, China's more interested in vehicles like BYD, which is offering more cost-effective products, which are just as fast, just as fun, certainly half the price or a quarter of the price of a lot of modern day European luxury vehicles. It's starting to show. Mercedes, Audi, Porsche, VAG Group, they're all suffering because the Chinese market is turning the page. They're starting to look at some more affordable options coming right from their home country by BYD and other options like. So Porsche and the VAG Group are trying to adapt and flex to the market demands. And vehicles like the Taycan, while they are selling, a lot of people just simply don't want them on the used market. And of course, the secondary pricing and values are in the tank. Vehicles like this, we're seeing a lot of these are popular, and that's ultimately what brought Porsche out of the loop. They had a couple times in history where they struggled making sales. One of them, of course, they introduced the Cayenne, which was one of the lifesavers for the brand. Another one was the Porsche Boxster, which they introduced way back, many moons ago, back in 1997. They always had those special vehicles that brought themselves out of harm's way. Porsche has had struggles throughout the years, time and time again, and they've always had to adapt and create something that's affordable and popular. Well, affordable was the Boxster when people could not afford a 911, and practical when the entire industry was going towards SUVs, sport utility vehicles. Porsche had to represent and do something of their own to make sure that they were still in the game, because they knew that they could not survive alone on just selling Porsche 911s. And while the true brand loyalists will always have a 911 in their garage, many people now are starting to look at other options from Porsche. You know, they have the SUVs, they have the sport utility vehicles, both electric as well as gas. as well as, of course, the sports cars and now EVs. So part of the pain that Porsche was experiencing as well when they last year announced that they were going to go full transition with their Macans and go pure EV. As you can see, I've already showed you some of the Macans. These are all electric, but customers were not loving it, and it seemed like they were throwing all of their eggs into that EV basket. Where did their internal combustion vehicles go? Well, most people know that Porsche lovers and enthusiasts are some of the most passionate car drivers on the planet. And when there was announcements of going hybrid in a 911, whoa, there was people upset about that. They currently have that though. But even more importantly, with the Macan, when they said they were going to entirely scrap the internal combustion engine and only bring in an electric version of the Macan, whoa, all bets were off. That's what triggered. The market was screaming to the brand, you better bring back the internal combustion engine, and Porsche reacted. Of course, they've always been good at doing that throughout history, reacting to what the customer and what the market wants, and so they've done that. So as a result, Porsche has announced that they're likely going to bring in a revamped Macan that has the capability to put an internal combustion engine. Of course, it's more or less the same chassis. It's just a matter of readapting engine mounts and basically dropping it in. But it's more or less on the same platform, so it'd be an easy fix. Couple of options, electric and internal combustion. The 911, that's also going to be a conversation piece, but for now, the flat six is still in business. So for those who love the 911, fret not, at least for the time being. Even with a hybrid, it's a small hybrid assist and generally still holds on to that wonderful flat six internal combustion drivetrain. So it's proof that the entire market is now impacted both by tariffs as well as cost of living crisis. A lot of people are struggling to make ends meet. Now, most people are going to argue, hey, if you can afford a Porsche, you're not going to struggle. Well, the fact is that could be the difference between driving one and not driving one. It's that simple. And at the end of the day, a lot of these manufacturers are trying to somehow increase profits year over year, month over month, but at the same token still maintain the level of sales. I'm not sure they can have both. I'd like to hear your thoughts below, whether you think Porsche, Volkswagen, Audi, that entire group can make it through this next 12 months. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Hope to see each and every one in the next one. See you real soon. Bye-bye.